Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host on Talk Architecture Podcast, direct from the Casuarina Meru Hotel in Ipoh, Perak, Malaysia. Well, I've attended an event, and I gave a keynote speech on the barriers and challenges to mainstream disability in the context of Sustainable Development Goals 2030, which is the agenda set by United Nations and signed by many countries in the world, including Malaysia. So this inherently is an agenda for Malaysia and an agenda for the Northern Corridor Implementation Agency, which is under the Northern Corridor NCER economic region. There are 4 states involved: Perlis, Kedah, Penang, and Perak. Sorry for all the mistakes there. Well, I'm overlooking the window of my bedroom or guest room at this hotel, and I can see Banjaran Titiwangsa, or the Titiwangsa mountain range. And beyond that, if you traverse that, you can come to the east coast of Malaysia and the other states in Malaysia Peninsula. Now, the barriers and challenges to mainstream disability I outlined in the keynote speech to be 5. 1, legislation. The second is the planning, hence the budgeting. 3rd, the implementation. 4th, it is the consultation with stakeholders. And 5 is the aging population. When we talk about anything we do now, we are looking at the increasing aging population. I will talk about that later. But first, I focus on the legislation, or the lack of bite to the current legislation, which is the Persons with Disabilities Act 2008. It has been around, but it has problems. And one of them is harmonization of that act with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Funny enough, CRPD by the United Nations was created in 2006, and the PWD Act in Malaysia could have harmonized better because it was enacted in Parliament in Malaysia in 2008. Obviously, there were things developing at that time, but the documentation could have been had and could have been better done so that there's more bite to the legislation. So there was a recent article that I referred to in the Malaysian Insight regarding how far behind Malaysia is compared to countries in the Asian and Pacific region, specifically the ASEAN region. So in that article, which is well researched, I quoted from that article the lack of implementation, the problem with it not being harmonized with the CRPD and so on. Basically, what I'm saying is we need an Anti-Discrimination Act or a Disability Discrimination Act, because it says it on the tin. It says it clearly that this act is an administrative act. It says Persons with Disabilities Act, but it is really an administrative act. And the seat of power, or the where the power comes from, is the Ministry of Women Family and Community Development, and it is controlled by the minister per se, presiding over a council of 10 people appointed by the minister from the community and from organizations to deal with disability. And the critical thing here is that 8 of the members in this council now, 2023, are non-disabled persons. And only 2 are disabled persons. So it has been not adhered to or not being critical of appointing people who are disabled or from the Disabled Persons Organization. In particular, we insist that nothing about us without us. So that's the mantra. So it is not a surprise that this is a toothless act. They call it the toothless tiger. Whatever it is, it doesn't have any bite. So you need an anti-discrimination act. And you need to have the disability commissioner, a redress mechanism, such as a tribunal that is independent and not controlled by, interested parties. I mean, it should be as autonomous as possible. If you have a disability commission, it needs to be directly answerable to the parliament, not occupied by one ministry. And there's problems from the beginning, 2008 until now, 2023, of multi-sectoral collaboration between the ministries. It is so difficult to get things going. And then I go to the next point, which is the planning and budgeting issues. And always we refer to the voluntary registration, not a proper way to find out exactly how many disabled persons are there in the country. So I quoted that the World Health Organization estimate that in a country, 16% of the population are disabled persons. Then I also quoted some research of projection of elderly persons in the country by 2040 to be 17%, and also cited that in the United States, it is found that 70% of people age from 65 years and above are disabled persons. So when we put things together, 33% of the population need accessibility, need universal design, need those special consideration, which should be a normal consideration now. And embedded in this third part is the implementation and the standardization from benchmarking what is the acceptable level of accommodation and design and services for persons with disabilities. If you look at persons with disabilities as an insignificant minority group, you're not including people in the SDG goals. Hence, I had to rush it yesterday, so I'm rushing it now too. But that is the third point, which is the implementation part. In the planning part, it is budgeting. So you're going to budget for 1 to 2%, and it's estimated that maximum 3% of persons with disabilities in a state in Malaysia, but often is 1 to 2%. And this is kind of like sad because there is lack of urgency to do this. But when you think about the aging population, which is the fifth point, in the light of a lot of other countries in the ASEAN region, such as Singapore, has been planning for the aging population, in fact, for 2050. And they've done so quite a number of years ago. So even 2015, when they started with the SDGs, they were already realized and started planning and budgeting for it. Now, when I said earlier about the legislation, what is the difference between this toothless legislation that we have in Malaysia with other legislation in the ASEAN region? As we can see, in Thailand and Indonesia, they don't have the power lodged in the Ministry of Women and Family Community Development like we have in Malaysia. The persons with disabilities are well represented, well heard, and they're able to control the discussion, the dialogue, and their destiny, the future of disabled person in that country. Huge country, a huge population such as Indonesia needing to have that power autonomous from a certain ministry. And so is Thailand. We have the compulsory inclusion of disabled person in that under the Empowerment Act that they have. When we have other other countries in the Asian and Pacific region, such as India and Korea, they have disability commissions in order to get the government to have due diligence on their role and their functions to get disabled persons to participate in society. There's a huge country, India. How are they going to do it? But they know that they need to have that power or center of power where concentration is needed to help persons with disabilities get the control of their destiny in each of these countries. So then the last one, the aging population, if you add the population of elderly person, as you know, disability is an evolving concept, and the problem of equal participation is based on the challenges and the barriers of attitudes, which is linked to physical barriers, obviously. Also communication barriers. So when we think about that, the aging population, the social protection of the most vulnerable groups of people, especially those who are the urban poor, and not having the social security or social protection that one need to survive in the old age, for example. This thing is something that if we leave it to chance or not plan for it, there will be a disaster in terms of the social situation in the country. So that is all I have to discuss regard what I gave, the speech that I gave. In fact, the speech was very limited in time, and all the points I've given in this podcast is similar to the speech I gave. Of course, I showed a bunch of slides of involvement in doing the universal design bus stop, involvement doing a multi-generational housing with a certain developer, and all these other images of us, consultation with the stakeholders, and the stakeholders are many and include disabled persons themselves. So it's great to see local authorities consulting disabled persons when they do a project, and also collaboration between small businesses and the local authorities in order to fulfill the objectives that is needed. So thank you for listening, and I hope that this is an interesting topic for everyone to consider. You may be in a country where it's already advanced, but now you know about the situation in Malaysia. You may be a disabled person who wants to know about this. You may be a postgraduate student wanting to research on a topic from the built environment profession, or an architectural trained person. So you would like to know the topics of universal design and accessibility. You can find it in my LinkedIn, in my Facebook, Naziaty Mohd Yaacob, or follow me on Instagram at rediscover_architect. And we need to put it out there. This conversation needs to be something that is consciously being thought of, and especially for those who are do functions and roles are the implementers of design and services in this country. So with that, thank you very much for listening.